So for assignment 4, we're going to create a multi-layered application, web application in Visual Studio. We're going to use the model view controller setup that Visual Studio provides. I'm going to walk you through setting up the first part of this so that you can see how some of it's done. We're first going to set up a simple hello world and look at how that goes. So that's the first thing you'll need to do and turn in. So first you need to create a new project. Now there's a websites here, but don't do that. That's an old style of websites. We no longer use that option. We always go to new project, and then inside new project we'll find the websites there. So we are in Visual C Sharp, and now we usually been going into web and Windows do console. We'll start moving into Windows Forms applications and also this web application. With these more sophisticated applications, we have to move kind of beyond the console so we can actually do some input and output and look at some of this stuff. So we're going to go to web and do this. Now if you have an earlier version of .NET, you might see multiple ones and you want to do the like ASP.NET 4.5 framework or something like that. But with Visual Studio 2015, this is the only option, and we're going to give it some name. So I'm going to call this assignment for model view controller samples. Now you can actually create and have some stuff set up for model view controllers and stuff like that, but we're just going to stick with the empty project, although we do want to have it will create some folders for MFC here. So make sure you have the empty project MVC here, and we're not going to host it in the cloud, we're going to host it locally, so make sure this is turned off. Host in the cloud should be turned off here. Okay. So we're going to start with a relatively empty application, though there will be a couple folders, empty folders created for us to put stuff in. So here's our project again. So there's a models folder here. We'll put in our data stuff here. The actual databases in Visual Studio usually goes into this app data folder, but we're not going to work with databases right now, but that's what that is used for. We also have a views folder and a web config, and we're not going to deal with this. There's a lot of web related stuff that we will not get into, be able to get into in software design, as far as laying things out and using JavaScript and using cascading style sheets and that sort of stuff. You cover a lot of that in your other web classes like client side and server side. Okay, so we have models, we have controllers, and we have views that we'll be working with. So we're going to the controller does most of the work, so we're going to start with a simple hello world controller. So we're going to go to controller and do add and in a controller. So there's two ways of doing this: is model view controllers and with this web API. For this we'll be using model view controllers, and we'll want to do an empty one so that we can just start with an empty one. Now controllers always end with the word controller here, and then they have some starting word that's important. We're just going to call ours hello. So create a controller says we called hello controller. Now to start with, it returns a view. We're not going to do that right away. We're just going to comment that out for just a sec, and instead we're going to put in some code here. We're going to return a web page directly. So we're going to just say return some web content. So there's a content function here we can call, and then inside here we're going to put a little HTML for now and just say hello world. Just to show this is HTML, we're going to put a B tag in front of it and an end to boldface it. Again, we're going to be doing some stuff with HTML and XML and JSON, and so I'll just explain some of the simple stuff there, but we will not be going into depth on HTML in this class, but just enough so we know what we can look at the examples of that. Okay, so this is just going to create put out a hello world web page. Now when I run this, it should run in Google Chrome or whatever my browser is set up to do right now. Mine is set up to use Chrome. So I'm going to run this. Now it takes a couple seconds for this to start up. It actually starts up a web server in the background running on my local host here, and then connects to that and sets up these pages on that local web server. At first you'll get this error, it won't find it because we have to look inside our controller. So we're going to go to localhost, whatever it is there. Your numbers might be different every time you run it. It should be different. And I'm going to go then slash the name of my controller, hello. And then it should print out hello world in bold. So again, I've just put in a slash hello after the localhost and then the port number, colon, some port number, and then I've added the slash hello there. Now, a reason why I had put hello slash hello is because my controller was called hello, and to get to this controller we have to do what is called a get to hello, and that's kind of the folder or the slash I have to put in there with the URL. Okay, I'm going to stop this. The website keeps going there. I'm going to have to hit stop to stop this. Okay, now we're going to move on. This is the controller running. Now we're going to move this content, instead of in the controller, we're going to move this to the view. So we're going to want to return this view. So I'm going to comment out this earlier one and return a view here. Now there's no views created. There's a hello folder here, but nothing in there. So I'm going to click on this index and say, now again, I've stopped it. Otherwise you can't add it. And not on the class, but on the actual index controller here. And I'm going to say add view. And I'll add an index controller. We want it empty for now, that's fine. And just hit add. Now, by default, we're using index as a name of the controller and of the view, because when you go to a website or a folder in a website, it automatically tries to load the index.html or some other extension file. So, okay, here's our code here, and right now there's a header sample code here. It says index. We want to change this to say hello from my view, index view, or something like that. So we want to make sure we know we're getting to this rather than our previous version. So I'm going to do a different hello here. Save this out and run. Now if I have the index opened up and I run this, it should open the index file directly. Remember last time I had to type in change the URL a little bit. Now if I run this, it should just go to localhost and then /hello/index. It should open it up directly here. Again, it might take a little bit to get everything started up and loaded. So now it says hello from my index view, or whatever you put in there should be displayed. Okay, so I'm going to close some of these and go back here and stop this. Okay, so the controller here is running this, is opening up this index here, this view, which is called index, and we can actually create additional indexes if we want. So I'm just going to copy this index and this method and make another one that we'll call a different view. So this one, they're both will be get hellos, but this one, rather than index, maybe we'll say big or Minnesota hello. So I'm giving it a different name here, and again it should be calling a view, and so I'm going to right click and create that view, add view, say OK. So now over in my views, I should say two views. I should say the index and the Minnesota hello, two different views. And now these are HTML, or actually almost HTML files. Okay, so then I can say a big hello from Minnesota. Okay. So now if I run it, this controller should bring up this view. Now if I just so it'll go to the localhost colon and then the port number and then slash hello and then Minnesota hello, and it should display big hello for Minnesota. Now if I just go to like index, it'll say the previous one, and in fact if I just go to hello, index will be loaded by default. And so again, if I want to go back to load up the Minnesota one, I have to go to Minnesota hello. So again, I can specify this is the controller name and this is the method within the controller and tied to the view that it's displaying. Okay. So that's the basics of controllers and views, but we don't have any data here. So let's look at putting some data in this. So let's stop this. So this is what I need from you, is this much for the hello world. I need this hello controller with these two methods. You can have your second one anything you want, but an index and then another one. And then two views that display two different things that we can run, and one of them should be called index so that it loads default when we go to hello. Okay, so that's what you need to turn in for the hello stuff, the first part. Now we're going to do the second part, and we're going to add a little database here and a controller for the database. So let's set that up. Okay, so let's start with our data model. We're going to make a really simple data model. So I'm going to go where models is, and I'm going to say add. And we're not going to add a controller now. When you add controllers or views, you have to do them in a special way to set them up. But when you're adding things like just a normal data view, it's just a normal class. So I'm going to go Visual Studio and Visual Studio class. I'm going to give it some name like we're going to make some data to hold student information. So I'm going to say student as my class. So I'm just going to create a student class file, a student.cs file here. And again, I right-clicked on models. I want this within models. If you create somewhere else, just drag it into models. And I did add class or add new item, and then make sure you select class from the code variables. Okay, so our student class, we're just going to keep this really simple now. In a real system, you would be loading data in from a database into a method, into a class like this. So you'd have a student database, you'd run SQL and load that information. So you'd probably have a student interface or use a student hibernate method here. But we're just going to keep it very simple this first time because it gets complicated enough. I'm just going to do a string, public string name, and use get and set. Remember, this is how we set up properties. Now, before we also talked about you could have a private variable behind this and do that. We're not even going to do that. We're going to keep it simple. We're just going to say public string name and a get and a set, and we're not going to do anything different, special with the get and the set. And then we'll make a public int. Let's see, student. I just want to do two different types. So besides the student's name, let's keep track of the student's credits. That's how many current credits the student has. So for each student, we'll keep track of the student name and credits. And again, you'd have a whole bunch of other fields in here, but again, we're going to keep things very simple. Okay, so that's our little model for a student that we have that we're going to save. Okay, so I'm going to save that with the Control S. Now we're going to go back into controllers and make a new controller. So go to controller. And then do add, and then do controllers. That's what I want. Okay, and again, we want a model view controller 5 controller that's empty and add that in. And we're going to call this student. But remember that, so that'll be how we'll get at it. That's kind of like the folder in the URL that we'll get to this, and it's a default index view here that we'll read. Okay, now we're going to do some simple code here, and again, not very much business logic. We're just going to create a student. So we're going to say private sorry, let's just do it a generic variable. We give it some name, um, stu equals, and then we'll do a new student. Now, I'd like to be able to call new student like this, but I get an error because I can't find student. And that's the problem with the student namespace. So these are in different namespaces here. Here I'm in this namespace, and in the data model I'm in this namespace. So I'm going to copy that namespace, bring it over here, and use that here. So I'm just going to say the name of my project, models, and then student here to create a new student. So I've got my new student, Stu, created. I'm going to say stu.name equals, and give it some name. I'm going to give it Tom. And stu.credits equals, and then some number. Let's say I'm taking 16 credits. Okay, so now we've got our student created. Now normally, again, we'd be reading in that from a database or doing something else from it, but we're just going to create one right here on the fly. Okay, now we're going to go to the view and display the student. So I'm going to make sure I have a view created. So if I look over at my views, there's hello and there's student, but student is empty. I haven't created any views there. So I'm going to click on index here and do add view to add a view there. Index is fine, and so it created the index view here. Now I need to get the data, the student information, from here into my view. Into my view I have this code here. Now this is HTML code here, but I can do some scripting. Now you can do Java scripting and others kind of scripting here, but to do C# scripting I use an @ sign, and then I can put any sort of C# I want. And we're going to use this, the way you get data in and out of here is through this view bag. We're going to stick stuff into a view bag and take it out. Now if you've had data structures, you probably have seen maps or bags of data. They're kind of like an array of data. But so with an array, I do something like view data and have some number in here. And so I'd have some number in there, and then store the student in there, something like that. But view data is not an array, it's a bag, and so my index in the bags are these maps is any string, and I can stick any data type in there. So I'm going to just give some string in here. I'm going to say student, oops, so for my view data, I'm going to say student info or something like that. And again, that has to be a string, and that's my key into this map or into this bag. So I'll say something like view data bracket student info, and I have to remember that, and then I say equals stu. So I'm sending this student that I created into this bag, wrapping it up with this tag that says student info, and then when I go into the view I can use this tag to unwrap it and pull this student out of the bag. Okay, so now I go into back in my view here for my index view for this, and I'm going to change this a little bit. So rather than doing this type of work, we'll do something very similar. I'm going to declare a variable called stu again over here, and I'm going to say is equal to viewBag.studentInfo. So this has to match. Now what did I call it? Oh, I call it student info all lowercase this time, so that has to match exactly with this. Okay, so all lowercase, those two have to match. So again, this is using the tag that I put on the student info when I stuffed it into the bag here. pulling that out of view bag and grabbing the student information and staring it into a generic variable. Now, C# has an option to just declare variables that can be, and it'll dynamically assign the right type to these as we need to. So I'll just say var and then the student, and it'll create one of the right type for this. Okay, and now I can say something like the student's name is, and then I want to say stu.name, but now this up here I had the @ and so that means I was in C# world here within my HTML thing, and here I'm doing HTML, but this one thing I want to be in C#, so I'm going to put an @ in front of that student name. So now I should run this and see how this works. So again, now I have a data model. I have a simple object out there for students. I'm using that in my controller. I'm not pulling it from a database or a service now, but I'm just using that at least to create my student information, and I'm passing that student data object to my controller, and then I'm able to display that information in my controller for things. So that's a really simple model view controller setup here, where I've got a student class as my data model. Right now I don't have anything else there, but I have that, and then in my controller I'm using that student class and filling in the information, and then I'm packaging that up and sending that to my view, and my view is unpackaging that and displaying some of that. It's a simple model view controller setup. Very primitive, but at least tries to illustrate the point. Okay, so we want you to do something similar for this assignment. Can you just change this so that it not only displays the student's name, but also the student's credit? So we assign the credits here. Make sure we're displaying those in the view. We have the full student here. You should be able to do that relatively simple. So we want you to have this student working, this student model controller, and this view set up. Now the last thing we're going to do is do a weather app, where we're going to actually use a web service to go out there. So we're going to use a RESTful service, make a call to a weather app, pull in data. It'll come as a JSON file. We'll unpack it, and then we'll display it. So this gets into actually a better, more sophisticated setup here, and I'll walk you through the first part of this and have you do the last part of it. Okay, so to do this weather application, we're going to start with the data model, which is going to be more complicated. So go to models, and we're going to create a new weather model. Now, because this code is complicated, I've put it in here, this weather.cs. So you can either create it here and then copy and paste this code into this, and do it that way, or you can just download this file and drag it into your project and put it there. Let me show you how to drag and drop that one. So again, I'm going to copy this down. Let me see. So it'll show up here, and I'm going to grab it. So I've got my weather file here, weather.cs. I'm just going to drag and drop that into my data models folder here, so it'll be there. So this copies that file you downloaded into this data model. So let's walk through and see what's in this data model here for us. We've got our web space here, and we have our class, our weather model, and we've got a couple strings here that we're using in just a sec. One is a string for holding JSON data, and the other one is a weather object, root weather object. We'll see both of those in just a sec. One of the main parts of this is this get weather method here. Let's look at that. Get weather. This is going to go out and grab data from our web service. Now this isn't the best way of grabbing the data from a service, but it's probably the simplest. So we're going to start here. It's a synchronous call, so it's going to hold up everything else while it does this, which isn't good. But again, it just shows how we at least can do this. So we're going to use something called openweathermap.org. So I'm just going to quickly go out there and show you that. Now, OpenWeatherMap.org provides weather data. Now, we could actually get this from the U.S. government weather service and stuff like this, but this API is just a little more standard and user-friendly, so we're just going to use that. So there's an API here where we can go, and there's different data that you have. Now, you've got to sign up for a login, and I've done that. We've created a free login for us, so we get just free data here. We can only do so many accesses per minute with this. And we can get at the current API, and we can go here and we can call this openweathermap.org data, the version weather, and then $Q, and then the location, London or London, UK. So we're going to do something similar here with our code. We're going to go to OpenWeather. Now I can actually take this URL. I'm just going to take this URL, copy it out, and paste it into a web browser here, and I'll load in the weather. So again, we're going weather, and then the location Q equals Duluth. You can actually do your own city if you want. I'm just doing Duluth, Minnesota. There's only really one Duluth that pops up. And then this API key, we have to sign up for a key through the API. Let me show you that again. When we sign into our account, here's our account for Scholastica students and our API keys. We can create different API keys to do different things. So I created an API key for this class, and here's this API key. So I had to create that and use that in the URL. So that's here. I also want to use imperial units Fahrenheit, because we're more used to that here. So I'm going to set that's also in this. So that's our configuration. This is the file we're going to get from here, and this is what is called a JSON file. JSON. So just so we can see this JSON file a little better, I'm putting it in an online JSON editor. So here's the file here, and here's how it's viewed. So again, there's a coordinates here, there's a start of a whole object, and latitude, longitude, weathers, and it's hard to see some of that. So this is actually structured in a hierarchy. It's similar to like XML, that's the competing standard, but where XML, this would all be in brackets like HTML, and we'd have a greater than, less than for our own description, and then an equals, and a lot of the same. It would look very much like HTML. This is JSON, and so JSON we have these attributes and then a colon and a value, and then we use these braces to mark our hierarchy. So the top one is the object hierarchy, and then we have a coordinates, and then inside coordinates we start another bracket here, and we have longitude and latitude. So that's where we have our object here. We have coordinates, and we have latitude and longitude, and these are the values that's in there. We have a weather here, which is actually an array of values. So you can see the array method here. We have main, which has our temperature. So this is what we're going to grab. We're going to go in our object, go into main, grab the temperature object from that. So this is the structure of that. Now let's go back to our code and see how that looks here. Okay, so we have get weather. We go out and we have this URL that grabs that JSON data. We have to create a new web client. This is HTTP. We have to send that out. So we just create a client for that, and we use that client to download a string using that URL. So this goes out, and we get this string back. This is our JSON weather string, and that's what actually is declared up here as a string. So we've declared that so we've grabbed that using the URL, and that is basically this is our string we're getting back. So now we've got to put this into an object, and that's what we call serializing, is taking text and when we take an object and put it into text, it's serializing. When we take something in text and move it back into an object, that's deserializing. And there's different ways of doing this. We're using this method called a JavaScript serializer that's built into C#. And so I'm just declaring a JavaScript serializer here called serializer, and then once I have that, I'm saying serializer.deserialize, and then I'm giving it this weather string, and it will parse this weather string into an object, but I need to create an object that fits this data. So if you remember this data, now here's a better format of it: object, coordinates, with all this stuff. This is my data, and so I have to have an object for that. So here's the object. Below this now is the objects for this. So we have a root weather object, which has the coordinate system, weather, main, clouds, all this stuff. So that matches this layout: coordinates, weather, main, all this stuff. There's a separate object for each one of those classes. So this is my root weather object, and below that I have coordinates, and I have a latitude and longitude. I have a system information. I have a weather information with ID and main. I have temperatures with the temp and the temp min and max here. So I have all these different values in here that I can get, all tied to this weather object. Now, these are each of those are classes, so it's outside this class. So here's our public weather model class. It goes down to here, and then here's a separate class within there. Now, I could easily have moved these into separate objects and separate files, but for this, I've just kept them together so they're all in one file. It makes it easier for you to download this one file and get it set up. Okay, so get weather is a public method, goes out, grabs the weather data, it reads into as a JSON string. We use a serializer, actually a deserializer, to take that string and convert it into an object. We've declared an object called a root weather object that is the type where all the fields match the fields in our JSON object. And so this automatically converts it and deserializes it. So I'm given a weather object, which is all the weather information in an object. So that's what I have here, is this private weather object with this. Okay, so now let's go in and go to our controller and do some work. So you're going to have to create now we've just created the data model. You have to go into controllers. We're going to create a weather controller, add controller. Again, model view controller 5, empty, call this a weather controller, and add this in here. So now from here we're going to create one of our weather objects. So we're going to say var weather equals new, and again we're going to just create a weather model here. That's this object here, but again we've got to put the full namespace in here. So we're just going to put the namespace in. There's other ways of doing it, but for now we're just going to put the namespace in right this way for this. Okay, so I've got the namespace in there, so I know where that's coming from. So I've got my weather data. Now with that weather data, I have to go and get the weather data. So remember, we have to go over the internet. So I've got to call this get weather. So I'm just going to say weather dot get weather. There it is. So that'll get the weather. And now I'm going to send that to the view. Now, to start with, we're just going to display the temperature in the view. So we don't even have a view yet. Again, we've got an empty weather folder in view. It created that for us, but we don't have it. So I'm going to right click on here and add the view. It'll add an index view here. And again, we have this bag of information. We can label things and put it in here. So from our controller, we want to put the temperature there. So we want to say something like view bag. Let's see. So we want to say something like view. And this side we say view data. And then bracket and then some tag here. So maybe I want to send in the temperature. and set it equal to whatever the temperature is. But I don't want to just put in some value here. I want to actually get the temperature from the weather object. So I use the weather object to get to read in all the temperature, but it's still only in the data model. So I'm going to switch back into my data model here. In my models, I have the weather data. It's open right here. So I'm going to add a method here, a public method. I'm going to the temperature down here is stored as a double. So I'm going to have this do the same thing. I'm going to have it return a double. And it's just going to be a property. And I'm going to have a get and the set. So for the get, I'm going to get, and I've got to find the weather object here. So from the root weather object, I'm going to go from there. I'm going to go into main, and inside main, I'm going to go. So where's main is a temperature. Inside there, I'm going to grab temp to do that. So you can actually see if I just type in, start with weather object dot, and I can look at the different options. Main is one, dot, and then there should be a temp here. There's humidity and temp and sea level and stuff. Temp. I'm going to grab that. So that's what I'm going to do with the get, and with the set, I'm going to, if I'm given some new value, I'm just going to set that in my weather object. Okay, so that's my set and the get. Now I have this temp method or property. So back here in my controller, I can just say view data.temperature equals, and then I can just go to my weather object, which I called weather.temp. And that should go and get the right the data model, then go out, figure out where the temperature is, and grab it and return it here. I've sent that to the view. Now in my view, I've got to take that out. I've got to say my view bag dot temperature. Now I have to make sure that this tag matches this tag exactly. I'm going to store that if I want. So let's store that into a double here. Double temp equals that. And I can say here, weather for Duluth, I'm going to put that in the heading tag. That's H2 is a heading tag. And then I'm going to do just a normal paragraph tag after that and do temperature is and display temp. Again, if I'm going to access a C# stuff here, I've got to put an at in front of it so that it'll treat it as a C# variable. So now it should display the temperature. So we're doing a lot in this example, sorry about that. But I think it's a cool way and shows you how you do some of this layering stuff. So we're getting this JSON data from the web, reading it into an object, and setting it up. And although we're using a service here to get it, you can imagine the same thing going out to a database and getting that data in and reading it into an object with Hibernate or some other object relation mapper. So here it is, weather for Duluth, and here's the current temperature in Duluth. Balmy, 55 degrees. Okay, stop this. So now your job is to add 3 things to this. We're going to have you, let's see if I have it all there, humidity, wind speed, and weather description here. So you might have to look through the data to figure out where that is in the weather model. So the humidity is right next to temperature in the same object as temperature, and it's an integer. The wind speed, there's a wind object and there's something called speed there, and it returns a double. So those are both pretty straightforward. Now the weather description is stored here inside the weather object, but the weather object is actually an array of one or a list of one object. So you have to use that weather and access the one element in that to get the weather description, but you should be able to access all 3 of those. See if you can get all 3 of those displayed here. You should be able to bring them all into the controller here. You'll need, remember we created properties for each one. We created property for temperature. You want to create properties for the other three things here, and then you'll want to use that property to then pass that information, bag that up, and send and tag that and send that to our view. And in our view, you'll want to unbag that and get that ready to display and display it all here. Okay, good luck. Let me know how it goes.